I'm Jimmy Bach, and this is History with Jimmy, along with my producer Chandler Holmes. And today we're going to be filming episode 31. I hope that you'll watch it. We've had a lot of interest about the mining because mining was so prevalent in this area between Shickshinny and Makanakwa, with Makanakwa being the larger mining operation in the area and employed many, many people, including my grandfather and so many other people that have come in to do tours and have seen one of our other episodes on mining. But this one is particular about mining in Makanakwa. And we have a brief history of the working class and the settlement, it was called. And here you can see a picture of the settlement. These are homes that were built on Italy Street. And there may be one or two left, I'm not quite sure. But we're thankful Frank Avina wrote this that I'm going to be reading about. And it said, the West End Coal Company was incorporated August 15, 1882. It took over the mining operation of the Makanakwa Coal Company, which was owned by the DuPont family. And also last week, in episode 29, Brian Caverly talked about his relation, Jesse Beadle, having worked with the DuPonts over there, and then also coming back to Shickshinny and Stackhouse Mountain. The DuPonts abandoned the works in 1872 due to labor and marketing problems. And I will talk about that later on in this episode about some of the issues with the labor problems. The mines were located at the West End. That's why it was named as the Northern Coal Field in Wyoming Valley. It is a canal-shaped trough of coal that extends from Shickshinny and Luzerne County 55 miles northeast of Forest City in Susquehanna County. Following the Wyoming Valley most of its way, it's said by 1900, listen to this fact, it is said by 1900 it is possible to walk 12 miles from Pittston to Nanticoke and never leave the underground maze of tunnels and shafts. That is just unbelievable that most of them haven't collapsed. I'm sure some have at this point. One of the first tasks for West End was to provide housing for its workers, community that sprang up in the woods behind the breaker, known as the Patch, and was mostly Eastern European immigrants settled here looking for work in the West End mines. West End also owned a beautiful tract of land overlooking the Susquehanna River and began to build 2 rows of New England-style salt box double-block homes. And there you can see in this picture. The development was built between 1882 and 1910, consisted of 76 dwellings, house numbers 27 through 102 Italy Street. It would be safe to say that the first group of homes built by the company were purely functional and monotonous. It wasn't until 1917 that the West End hired Grosvenor Adury to continue their housing development to the south and west along the banks of the river. 1917 was the peak year of anthracite production in Pennsylvania. His skill in designing a community of simple, standardized homes with character is evident in the map recorded in Luzerne County on February 10, 1931, map page 3, pages 179 and 178. 51.5-story cottages Adury built for the West End was quite modern for their time. They all had indoor plumbing and coal furnaces. There was a sewage plant for the entire West End development constructed on a portion of Cadkey's field, but it was destroyed by fire. To provide variety and give each house a little character, some of the cottages on the corner lots were covered with cedar shake shingles. The remaining houses were clapboard siding. Porch roof varied. Some had flat roofs, some were pitched. All the houses had slate roofs and embellishments such as trellises around the windows, lattice work, arched wooden entrances, gates framed in ivory. It truly looked like a storybook village. The homes were built to house the miners and their families. A waiting list to rent one of the Adury cottages soon developed, and the company had a rule. And this is something about we'll talk about later, but this was the rule. In order to rent a home, therefore, a man in the household working in the mines, if he left the mines on his own or was killed, the family had to move. And that is something that we will talk about. In 1931, West End decided to liquidate its real estate holdings along the river and offered the double block homes to miners. They had first dibs. For $2,500, the 50 Adury Cottages were $1,500 each, regardless of lot size and proximity to the river. The homes literally sold like hotcakes. This action provided an opportunity for mostly Polish, Italian, Slovak immigrants who just 30 years earlier crossed the Atlantic to own a piece of the American dream. Most of the homes were passed down to the original owners' children and grandchildren. You never saw a realtor sign in Mackinac when I was growing up. Some homes are still owned and occupied by third-generation descendants like me. And again, this was written by Frank Gavino, a local historian and one of my mentors. Although the homes were humble, Adury spared no expense when it came to landscaping, including gardens, flowering trees, shrubs, fruit trees for the residents to have apple, pear, cherry, plum, and peach trees. The streets were lined with Norway maples to provide shade in the summer, and out of the 50 Adury cottages, at this point 47 were standing. One burned in 1930, two others included in an earlier buyout about 15 years ago. 12 are scheduled to be demolished as part of the 2011 Storm Lee FEMA buyout program. So I think there's at least one there, I believe Frank had told me at that time. So speaking of the mining operation, I had told you a previous episode about miners that were trapped for 5.5 days. This particular episode that we're talking about is going back to 1885, August 11th. It said, a frightful mine accident occurred in the West End Coal Company's mine at Mackinac this morning, by which at least 12 lives were lost and 25 children rendered fatherless. For 5 years, not a single fatality had occurred in this mine, and it was considered one of the safest in the valley. So generally, this was the belief that men would work in it for less money than other mines because the risk of life was not so great as it was in many, many other mines in Wyoming Valley. About 9 o'clock in the morning, the engineer in charge of the fan, which supplied air to the mines, discovered that the shaft was bent and the fan would not work as usual. So in other words, it was running too low. They couldn't put enough air inside the mines, and also then what would happen is the gas would not be taken out, and so that's where the problem started. So it was running at too low of a rate of speed, diminishing the amount of air in the mine below, where 100 men were working digging coal. The engineer, instead of giving the alarm at once to the miners, attempted to repair the broken fan, but his efforts were without success. During all the time, the gas in the mines was accumulating in large quantities, and when it came pouring into different galleries, it was too late for the miners to escape. The fire boss was the first to give the alarm. He was at the bottom of the slope, nearest the surface, and had a chance to make his escape had he so desired. But he knew there were over 100 of his fellow men in the mines, and to leave them meant instant death toll for all. He certainly was a hero. Quickly summoning a couple of door tenders, he made his way through the dark subterranean passages of the mine, yelling at the top of his voice, "Men, there is gas in the mines. Run for your lives, quick." He was not able to reach every quarter of the mine, which covers an area 2 miles underground. When he had gone halfway down through the mine, he was overcome by gas and prostrated. Many of the miners who had heard his words of alarm hastily quickened to the mouth of the mine and made their escape. But many others became exhausted and had succumbed to the power of the poisonous gas. An eyewitness, a miner who worked in one of the chambers, who made his escape to the surface, described the scene in the mine when the alarm was first given. About 9 o'clock, I noticed there was more or less gas in the mines, but the engineer in charge of the fan had slacked up a little to make some repairs. This is the case, but when necessary repairs are made, the fan is given increased speed and it soon cleans out the gas. About 10 minutes before I heard the fire boss give the alarm, I thought the gas was increasing and I stated that to my laborer. I then told for the first time that I realized something was the matter. I told my laborer we better make our way out. We threw down our tools and hastily took our departure. We had not gone 100 yards when I noticed a dozen rats running ahead of me. That's how miners knew when somebody didn't signal there was a problem. When they saw rats running out of the mines, they knew they had to get out because there was gas. The rats detected the gas first. My laborer turned white at the sight of them. He said, "My God, John, do you see the rats running? We'll all be killed." We ran for all we were worth through the dark passages. We were within 500 yards of the opening when I heard the fire boss give the alarm. We were now almost exhausted from the gas, and in our progress through the mine, we could hear the groans of those who had succumbed to the gas and fallen to the ground. Every few yards we went, we would stumble over some poor unfortunate like ourselves, had attempted to make escape from the death-dealing vapor, but had fallen from the roadway. Some of them we tried to put on their feet, but they were stiff as a log and could not move. Seeing we could render no relief, we trudged on, and now and then stumbling over the prostrate bodies of other miners, and at last my laborer gave out. He fell. I tried to drag him, but it was no use. He was dead in a few minutes, and I knew that if I remained 5 minutes longer, I would be dead too. I hastened on and saw the last foot of the slope where some men were at work lifting unconscious to the bucket so they could be carried to open air. This is all I could remember. For the next moment I fell from sheer exhaustion. I was carried to the top by the relief party, and as soon as the accident became known, a relief party was organized with Superintendent John Teasdale at the head. They went down into the mine and rescued about 80 men who were nearest to the mouth of the mine. All of them were in an unconscious condition, and when brought to the surface were stretched out on the earth, medical assistance summoned. All the doctors for 20 miles around were pressed into service. The scene was most pitiful one. The mothers, wives, and sisters of the miners gathered around the spot and made the air echo with their cries and lamentations. They were of great assistance, however, and tenderly cared for the prostrate men. Some were carried to the log shanties, and there were aid of nature's help, and the kind administration friends soon recovered. Others, too weak to recover, died in a short time. At 12 o'clock, there were no less than 200 women gathered about the mouth of the mine. If a friend was missing, they would patiently await the arrival of the rescuing party below, who generally brought up half of them. Most of them were dead. These men presented a horrible sight when brought to the surface. Though the coal dust which covered their faces could be seen blanched features, a death-like pallor. A wife would see her husband in this condition and rush towards her dying man, catching him in her arms and giving vent to the most pitiful moans. Sisters carried their brothers in their arms to the shady nook and wiped the death-like perspiration from their brows. All attempts to get the fan running ordered fruitless, and at 4 o'clock the rescuing party was compelled to give up the search, the gas in the mines being too strong. They rescued about 115. 12 are known to be dead. Here is the list of the death known so far. James Weeblen, age 54, miner, widower with 6 small children. Hiram Mead, age 40, married, 2 children. William Zenity, age 24, labor, single. Peter Bodarski, age 27, minor, single. John Bilby, age 40, minor, married, 5 children. James Fry, age 32, minor, married, 2 children. Nicholas Bertels, age 36, minor, 5 children. William Wilson Reimer, age 28, laborer, married, 2 children. Another Anthony Borowski, age 24, minor, single. Joseph Borowski, minor, married, 3 children. Laban Yurkowski, age 26, minor, single. And William Price, laborer, age 22. Dr. Hughes, a prominent physician of Shickshinny, went down to the mine to assist injured men and was overcome by gas. He was rescued with difficulty and brought to the surface senseless. Superintendent John Teasdale, who went to the mine with the rescuing party, was overcome by gas and brought up from the mine in an unconscious condition. He remained so, but will probably recover. This is from 1884 and 1885. As I read this book, and I'm recommending to everybody that watches this episode, you can come to the Charles Library or come to the museum. You need to read this book. This tells what happens back in the 1850s up to 1935 and what happened to these miners and what happened to so many other miners that worked there. This was called the Pennsylvania Coal and Iron Police, and they patrolled these mines, and they were hired. They had no qualifications, but they were hired when the miners went on strike because of conditions like this that you heard. The guy that didn't fix that fan, what happened to him? He ended up with a $50 fine, and all those men died because he was protected by the mining companies, and they controlled everything. I'm going to read just 1 or 2 things as we close out this episode, and I hope that you'll really listen to me and come get this book. They lobbied for legislation, and the state courts granted them a remaining order. But it prohibited marches and other demonstrations that interfered with company operations and property. So a lot of the legislations that they passed was useless. Here was one lady who had family there. She served 6 months in prison for inciting a riot while defending her constitutional rights. Fanny Sellens was given pardon by then President Woodrow Wilson. With a compassionate and steady hand, Sellens' reputation preceded her by the time she moved to New Kensington in the Allegheny-Kiski Valley. Her shocking death on the eve of organizing steelworkers' strike on August 29, 1990, illustrated how brutal company authorities as these coal and iron police could be, how corrupt and biased the system was, and how slowly and ineffective justice and legislation delivers. At the end is a picture of what happened to her. I hope you can see this picture. Two men stood trial for the acquittal of her murder. 4 years after her death, a strange event took turn. Allegheny Sheriff William Haddock sent a letter to the Senate committee investigating the steel strike, claiming that Sellens' body had been deliberately mutilated after the official autopsy. To discredit those in authority and for the further purpose of furnishing anarchy, dangerous and revolutionary agitators and organizers propaganda to be used in the steel strike against the state and national governments. Although the incident is remotely connected with the strike, he charged that the officers were victims of a frame-up against a woman who was just protesting on behalf of steel workers and coal workers. A request of Sellens' relatives, the body was exhumed and examined. The gunshot in the back that was omitted from the original examination verdict was confirmed, and labor leaders pointed to the type of tactics being used to defeat workers' morale while working. This is why they needed a union. They needed the mine workers union, the steels workers union, to stand up for these miners who had no way to defend themselves. They were killed, they were shot. When they would work in the mines when there was a strike, they were thrown out of these homes. They weren't allowed to live there. And they put them in tents, and women and children and their families had to live in tents for 16 months through brutal winters and flooding and everything else. Nobody cared for them. Nobody cared. So today is a reason that we should remember these miners, these steel workers who helped frame the United States and provided work and families, built churches, community organizations. Just as we remember veterans, we need to remember the coal miners, the steel workers, the people that made America. And that's what we're doing here at the FLT building. This is Jimmy Bach, along with my producer Chandler Holmes, signing off for episode 31. Please click the like and subscribe and pass this on, and come get this book and read it. I know you will enjoy it. Thank you for watching.